Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel for a new video on Garou Mark of the Wolves 2, or better to say Fatal Fury City of the Wolves, as it will be titled. The next game from S.P.G, which we can say draws inspiration and continues the story of Garou Mark of the Wolves, released way back in 1999. So it's been 25 years already, and for its 26th year, they released this sequel, which has been highly anticipated. Actually, even at the time when the first Garou Mark of the Wolves was released, the second Mark of the Wolves was in the works, which never saw the light of day. And here we finally are. We've been waiting for it for so long. We have this new Garou that's about to come out, and I decided to make a video to show you the differences between the old and the new Garou, to help you understand where this series is heading. What are the main differences between the two titles? What has been removed? What has been added? What can we say about this new Garou? I keep calling it Garou for a bit, probably forever. Well, first of all, the graphical aspect has changed. Initially, it seemed very similar to King of Fighters 15, which, by the way, was a graphical style that I absolutely didn't appreciate. I have to say that this time they managed to give it a much more personal touch, a much more important personality to this game from an aesthetic point of view. If we take a look, there's an overuse of shadows on the characters. Also, the filters they used visually, especially during the super moves, those dotted style filters that remind me a lot of the Spider-Man comics I used to read as a child, shouts a return to the 90s, and it's a nice touch by S.P.G. I'm not gonna lie. As for the substance of the game, as for the mechanics, not much has changed from the original game, because actually the original game had particularly interesting mechanics. However, they have been somewhat refined, because with these particular mechanics, we also had a good load of bugs and problems that ultimately didn't allow you to fully utilize what the game wanted to give you. Instead, in this case, S.P.G managed not only to maintain all the old mechanics, but to add new ones that, in my opinion, are well contextualized within the title. So, I'll immediately move on to show you the mechanics, to explain them, and to help you understand the difference between the old and the new one. The novelty of this title in terms of mechanics is the Rev Gauge, which allows us to access special moves. The Rev Defense, which is practically a guard that allows you to push away the opponent while defending. Then there's the Rev Blow, which is a move that allows you to counterattack the opponent because it has a guard point, a point of hyper armor, against enemy attacks. Then we have the Rev Arts, which are practically the X moves of Street Fighter. And then we have the Rev Accelerations, which are essentially combo of Rev Arts, which can be chained together to increase the damage of a combo. With the mechanics being different, mixing the old ones that have remained with new ones, I decided to start by explaining the new mechanics right away. So let's talk about Rev Gauge, then I show you later in the video a part with the old mechanics. You'll find the time with the index for the various topics in the description, so you can go directly to the topic that interests you most. I thank and apologize to Maximilian Dude and Justin Wong, who might not care at all, but I use their videos to find interesting clips to show you with some mechanics shown in a precise way. So you won't hear much of the game audio because there are also their voices doing the commentary in the meantime. With that said, let's see what the features of the Rev Gauge are, which is that semicircle bar above the two super bars. In this game, we have 4 bars, so 2 for the supers, one is the Rev, and the other is the blue one under the life of our characters, which is the defense guard bar. Basically, at the beginning of the round, our Rev Meter will be at 0%, and its operation is identical to the blood bar of Nagoriyuki in Guilty Gear Strive. Basically, for every rev art we do, our rev meter will go up until it reaches 100% and send us into overheat. In the moment we are in overheat, we will lose the ability to use all the rev moves. So it's essentially in City of the Wolves to be able to manage the amount of special moves we do to avoid going into overheat too prematurely. And how does our rev meter increase during the game? Every time we do rev moves like acceleration, which is done by canceling rev arts into other rev arts, we increase our rev bar. Every time we use raw rev arts, as well as if we use the Rev Blow, which can only be done when we have the rev bar between 0 and 99%, and when we are in S.P.G, which is the different colored area of our health bar. Also, if we use the Rev Guard, our rev meter increases, as it does if we use the block too much. We must therefore be able to manage the increase and decrease of the rev meter to avoid going into overheat and losing the ability to use rev moves. How do we then decrease the rev meter while we are between 0 and 99%? Our rev meter will remain there where it is. So if we do, for example, a rev art that increases our rev meter to 20%, it will remain fixed at 20%. To lower it, I can walk forward and be proactive while exposing myself to risks, try to hit the opponent and lower the rev meter with normal attacks. Obviously, these attacks must hit, must not be blocked. To decrease the rev gauge, we can also use specials, but not the rev arts. Just defended and hyper defense will work as well, which are two other mechanics that we will see later in this video. If instead we hit our opponent with a super, we could do damage, but the rev meter will not increase. It will always remain stable. What happens if we instead reach 100%? We go into overheat. In overheat, we can no longer use rev moves at all. So rev accelerations, rev arts, rev defense, and rev blows will be unavailable until cooldown. However, we have the possibility to do one more thing. We have a secret super called Hidden Gear that is activated only when we are in overheat and when we have two super bars completely filled. Also, we must be in the S.P.G section of the health bar to be able to activate this Hidden Gear. If we use this secret super and manage to hit the opponent, our rev meter will go back from overheat directly to 0. The overheat situation has an automatic cooldown. This means that gradually our bar will empty automatically. However, we can speed up this cooldown by inflicting damage on the opponent or by using just defended or hyper defense. Of course, the more damage, the faster the overheat cooldown. This is perhaps the most interesting part of the new Fatal Fury City of the Wolves. And now I'd like to show you some examples of these mechanics I've talked about regarding the rev meter. Let's see these in action. In this clip you can see how much the Rev Blow resembles a drive impact from Street Fighter 6. It has a guard point, and you can see that Rock was hit by Terry, but he has a point of hyper armor, so he can counter Terry with a kick to the head. You'll notice they both have a point of colored bar at the top because their S.P.G has activated, allowing them to use the Rev Blow. Here, we see rev arts connected together by a rev acceleration. You'll notice there's a blue shadow of the character. That's a rev acceleration. I'll also show you how much the rev meter increases when you use a special. Those two projectiles that Rock launched into the air are a rev art, thus significantly increasing the rev meter, as did the last combo he performed because it was a rev acceleration. Here, I'll also show you the Rev Guard. I can only show it to you in this clip because during the game it's barely visible. It's essentially a guard that allows you to do a push block to push your opponent away while being hit. This is particularly useful because in the old Garou there were combos that could be done infinitely, essentially exploiting the block strings of the various characters plus their feints. In this Fatal Fury, it won't be possible to exploit infinite combos, thanks to the Rev Guard. To execute it, you just need to press a button, which in this case I believe will be R1, dedicated solely to the Rev Guard. While in Rev Guard, you can buffer specials as well, meaning you can input the commands with the left stick or directions to start preparing specials or supers that you can then execute after the block string. Well, now that we've covered all the mechanics related to the Rev Meter or Rev Gauge, we can look at the other mechanics of this game, which are quite a few, and make a comparison between the old game and the new one. Let's start by seeing what they are. First of all, it's worth mentioning that Garou, Mark of the Wolves, was a game played with 4 buttons. We had a weak punch, strong punch, a weak kick, and a strong kick. Then there were combinations of buttons that allowed us to access other attacks, other moves, in particular the universal overhead, which was a move that helped us avoid all low attacks and throws. What remains and is also present in Garou is the universal anti-air, which allows us to make a move that counters the aerial assaults of our opponents. But in the old one, it didn't work quite well, in the sense that many of these universal anti-airs were not effectively usable because they weren't very accurately designed. Also, another combination of 2 buttons allowed us to do feints, feints of special moves. There were 2 for each character, done with 2 buttons together plus the direction down or forward, and these have remained, but they added 1 more, so now each and every character has 3 feints. Then we had another combination of buttons that allowed us to do the breaks. The breaks were the ability to interrupt a move, often our Dragon Punch, to continue the combos. Essentially, we performed the Dragon Punch, which was interrupted in the first frames of animation. The opponent was hit and flew into the air, and we could use these breaks to do aerial combos, while our opponent couldn't defend. Furthermore, another important thing was the top bar, which is now called S.P.G. The S.P.G acronym stands for Selective Potential Gear, so it's a third of a bar that we can decide to position at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of our health bar. In the old Garou, it allowed us to have increased damage, a slight restoration of the health bar, to increase the speed at which the bar increased for special and the supers, and to do the top attack, or in this case, to do the Rev Blow. These mechanics have remained practically unchanged. The only difference is that when we are in S.P.G, the Rev Gauge grows more slowly than when we are out of S.P.G. And the other difference is that actually the placement of the S.P.G within the health bar varies the bonuses it allows us to have. So we'll have different bonuses if it's in the first, second, or last third of our health bar. This is actually absolutely new, and we still need to understand exactly how the various bonuses tied to the placement of our S.P.G will vary. Another important mechanic in Garou Mark of the Wolves was the guard crash. So the possibility of breaking the opponent's guard if they blocked for too long has been reproduced almost exactly as it was. The only thing that has been changed is that now, to break the opponent's guard, we must first have our opponent in overheat state. So we can say that the Rev and the block gauge works as a single long block bar. Because obviously, if I block while I'm not in overheat, my Rev gauge will increase until it sends me into overheat. And if I continue to block there, my defense bar will decrease until it sends me into a guard crash. Unfortunately, I don't have any concrete examples to show you for this mechanic. Another fun mechanic of Garou was the JD, or Just Defended, which we also find in this sequel. This defensive maneuver is activated by blocking at the last second an opponent's attack, and the in-game effects are as follows: recovering a reduced amount of health, reducing pushback, and reducing recovery after the block, useful for counterattacking if successful. If we manage to counterattack with a special, our JD becomes a guard cancel. In Fatal Fury, City of the Wolves, if we press forward or down forward when we are hit during a 2 frames window, we could enter the state of hyper defended. This allows us to execute a special without being interrupted by the opponent or even a super, freeing us from pressure. What's interesting about this game is that before doing Just Defend, you can input commands for a super, and as soon as Just Defend connected, you just have to press the attack button to start the super. As a final important note on JD, let me show you the instant air JD, which is practically a JD executed in a split second after a jump, and therefore while we are in ascending parabola. This is an advanced technique that was present in the old Garou, and I'm glad to see it's still present in Fatal Fury. Alright guys, I've told you almost everything, and the last things I'll mention briefly, also because this video is already quite long. The round time is still at 60 seconds, the damage is generally always high, but in the old Garou it was higher. The combos are still short and it's a neutral based game, so short but intense combos, and therefore a defensive game, even though with this Rev Meter they've turned it into a slightly more offensive game than before. And there are still hyperjumps, hops, and differences in mobility between the characters, which are very interesting, so not all characters run, not all jump at the same height, not all retreat at the same speed, and they have removed the backstep invulnerability. Throws have changed as well. Now they are done with 2 buttons and there's a whiff animation if we miss the opponent. Well, having said that, I just have to say goodbye and see you in the next video. Remember that if you want to join the Garou community, I leave the links in the description, and in the meantime, we can play the old one, which is very similar to the new one. And to celebrate the old game and the new game, I leave you with this last example of a round fight that in my opinion shows a little bit of everything we've talked about. And you can also notice the parallelism with the old title. Thanks for staying with me until the end of the video. I hope I didn't bore you too much. See you next time. Bye bye guys.
Also works in the air, but the crazy one is that if attacks have multiple hits, like Rock with Shining Knuckle, right, hits you with the elbow and then he pushes forward with the palm, if you just defend the first hit, you can tap forward right after and get something called hyper defense. And the frame data for this is about 2 frames from the just defense timing of pressing back to forward. And for anybody that's played a little other game that has something called a red parry in it, that is the exact same sort of frame data. And also the same motion. So when you're blocking something in a game like Street Fighter 3 Third Strike and you tap to forward to follow up the next attack while blocking, you're able to red parry. And this is sort of similar. It's just that you have to tap the back so it's even harder, and then tap the forward within a couple of frames. So yeah, they effectively added a...
Hi guys, I forgot one thing. I think I will be restarting streaming from this week on every Tuesday at 9:30 European time. So if you want to come along and play a bit of Garou or talk about it, you're more than welcome. See you guys.